Hello friends, and welcome back to Shelley Skylines BrizVegas. It's another fine, rainy day in Brisbane town and... oh no! The realism is realisming here today with our first real flood event since I established the city. For anyone that's new here, this is my little city based on the real city of Brisbane, Australia, and we're doing our best to try and recreate it with some city skylines magic. And if you didn't know, Brisbane is renowned for its many floods with lots of huge flooding events over the last couple of centuries and probably more. And as you can see, it's been raining quite a lot in BrizVegas and still is as we speak, both in city skylines and IRL for that matter. And I think this has actually created the river to rise and flood this part of town. At least that's what I'm going with, as it would mean that I've actually done quite well to replicate Brisbane and the conditions that lead to all the constant flooding. Now, I've mentioned about the flooding issues I had when I first started to draw in the Brisbane River, but it's been super stable since that time. And at that point, I didn't have any buildings or anything drawn in here, so it was pretty easy to recover when it happened. So now we are faced with some real flooding and some executive town planner decisions need to be made. So we're going to look on the bright side here and see it as an opportunity to get this looking a lot more like the Brisbane CBD, especially the road layouts, as the first streets laid in Brisbane, at least by the colonial settlers, I think they need to be accurate. Now, I went into this thinking I'd have a quick and easy destruction blitz, and then draw some roads, chuck in some buildings, and call it a day. Oh, how wrong I was. I spent about 3 hours just going through this place and removing things, finding lots of issues and basically deciding to just redo complete chunks of it, including the Riverside Expressway. But I'm a lot happier now with how this went. So I'll show you some of this now, but I'll probably just speed it up a little bit given just how long it took, and then we'll look at how to actually fix this flooding. So I think I can sum it up pretty briefly when it comes to how to fix flooding in the context of Cities Skylines 2. And in my experience, the only real thing you can do is demolish the roads and buildings and basically just terraform it up. And the other tip is probably to do it on pause, but check in as you go. Unpause and make sure the water is settling alright. The game struggles a bit with drastic water changes. So if you do some big terraforming and impact the water too much in one go, you might just crash the game and lose your save, just as I did many weeks ago. So I can't help but be reminded of the 2011 floods when I'm doing this, and I was still living in Brisbane when these happened. It was roughly the same time of year as well, around the 11th of January, when it rained and rained and rained. And eventually the Brisbane River broke its banks, just as it has many times in the past. But this was the first major flood event to hit the city since 1974. In fact, I was working right about here, and I remember the day it all started to unfold and when it became pretty clear the city was about to go under. It was quite a strange thing to experience such a huge weather event and seeing all the places you hang out and walk past every day being completely submerged with a raging and wild river. Some pretty chaotic scenes when the river was at its peak. I was fortunate at the time to be living in Spring Hill and basically on a giant rock, so I was in no way affected as so many sadly and devastatingly were. It does bring up a lot of memories of how Queensland basically came to a standstill for some time. Not just while the river peaked, but the huge cleanup effort that ensued, for weeks, months, and in some cases years. Similar to past floods, these were far-reaching floods that affected many parts of Queensland. In this instance, it was slightly different in the sense that the floods didn't actually go as high as they have in 1897 or even in 1974. In fact, there was several meters difference in terms of how high the river peaked, but the impact was increased dramatically due to the sheer amount of development that had occurred since then. For some reason, despite having this history of flooding, so many houses and businesses were developed right in the impact zone. There's a lot of material out there that goes into all of this in great detail about the how and the why. So I'll leave it to the experts if you want to go and read more on that. But like I said, I do think it's a bit of a blessing in disguise, as I've been wanting to fix this part of town. So I suppose we should finally unpause the game after all the destruction and see how the Sims deal with the change. Well, the people seem okay, but I'm not sure about the trams. So wowzers, BrizVegas has taken a beating. So let me bring up the map now. Brisbane is basically just a simple grid layout, but an interesting aspect is the way the streets are named, I think. So you'll notice here that we have all traditional male names going that-a-way and traditional female names going that-a-way. I believe it was done this way because similar to naming things like 1st, 2nd, 3rd Street, I suppose, you could kind of get your bearings around the place. If you knew what street you were going to, you'd know how to get there, or at least know that you're on the right track if you could find the street name. Yeah, I'm sure there's some logic to it that I'm not quite explaining very well. It's not a massively exciting story to what the street names actually are. As you can see, some of these names like Queen Street, Anne Street, Edward Street, Mary Street. It's a classic case of colonial folks naming things after their kings or queens or other royal family members back in merry old colonial HQ. However, if you are interested in this, when I was looking into it, I did find a fantastic video that went through some of this background. I definitely recommend checking out Walkabout with Rob. He has an amazing series of videos going into the history of various parts of Brisbane and beyond, and I just love the way he explains it all and digs a bit deeper into some of the more quirky aspects of Brisbane. It's a great source of information for me in this series, so definitely go check him out. So these streets really took some doing, so let me just finish this and I'll BRB. And then just as I finished the on-ramp of doom, the game crashed. But we're back, so now we have our streets laid down. Let's get to establishing the Botanical Gardens again. The Brisbane Botanical Gardens were established in 1828 to provide food for the early penal colony. And due to their location here, right at the river, they've been a consistent victim of all these past flooding events, so I suppose they're used to this treatment. A good opportunity to exercise some fine foliage artistry. We also have the River Stage nearby, an outdoor music venue. And I noticed in the dev tools there is a cute little stage here, so let's chuck that in. And I hope these shrubs look good when the snow clears, because man, it's hard to see my artistic vision. Let's trust the process. And a good place to put in some of these invisible pedestrian paths. So let's see if the Sims come check out a show. While we're on Alice Street, this is where the Queensland University of Technology and State Parliament is. I have no way of fitting that in here, so I'm going to see what I can come up with using the dev tools. Damn, it would be good if I could use things like the libraries or extension wings here. I might have to go over some classic zoning along the pedestrian path, and I might as well whack in one of those elementary schools as well. And the snow is cleared. I think that looks pretty sweet. There's also a lot of hotels and stuff down this end of town, so I might give this new Rico mod a whirl to put some actual hotel buildings here. Okay, well, I don't know if that was necessarily easier to find things compared to using the dev tools to do this. But what I do love about this mod is I don't have to zone underneath them. Much easier. And let's just keep working our way up from here to add in a few other notable landmarks. The next one I'm thinking about is Festival Hall, which sadly no longer exists, but it was located on the southern corner of Albert Street and Charlotte Street, prior to being demolished to make way for what is now known as Festival Towers. This place is memorable for me as I went to my first concert here back in 1995, and I saw Silverchair when they had first come out. Very exciting for 10-year-old young Shelley Skylines having my dad take me along, and still one of my all-time favourite memories. Thanks, Dad! So I wonder what we can use for this, and I guess we can come back later and replace it with some boring high-density residential at a later stage. It's quite a flat, square building though, so maybe I'll go with this square centre signature building. Perfect. And as we move up Charlotte Street, there's so many old buildings that actually still exist today. And speaking of young Shelley Skylines, I just loved catching the train into the CBD and heading to this part of town in particular, as it had archives fine books, claiming to have over 1 million books. Such a cool old building and place to visit if you've never been. I think these condos might give us a similar aesthetic. Some of the other notable buildings I want to capture around here would be what's known as the Pancake Manor. 24/7 pancakes, who'd have thought? Also on Charlotte Street, this was originally St. Luke's Anglican Church, but it's been known as the Pancake Manor since 1979. Now what can we use for this one? Maybe the Malari Palace. It's got a bit of church-like aesthetics going on here, and it also matches the bricks next to archives books. As I'm doing this, I'm noticing these roads could have probably been closer together, but too late for that now. Now getting up to Queen Street. So to draw in the mall here, because Queen Street is a grand pedestrian mall, I think I'll use the same trick from Shelley Beach and basically pave this out between the surrounding streets so that we can customize it similar to the Queen Street Mall. We can use those handy dandy invisible pedestrian paths to ensure the Sims can still get around. And then I might use some of these commercial buildings mixed in with some little assets from the DevTools. Now, not exactly like Queen Street Mall, I'll probably have to do some finessing of this later, but now we're getting somewhere. Let's take a look around Adelaide and Ann Street, where we have King George Square. This is actually where the Brisbane City Hall is, and these days, for some reason, they made a decision to pave the entire thing. But back in my day, it had a lot more grassy areas, and I think I'm going to do a little nod back to this, as I think it looks a lot better and will give us an opportunity to break up some of the concrete jungle. Now moving across to the right a bit, we have Edward Street. There's quite a few old pubs around this part of town that still exist as well. We have the Exchange Hotel on the corner of Edward and Charlotte Street, built in 1863. These cane residences will do nicely. We also have the Victory Hotel, or the Vic, sitting on the other corner of Edward Street and Charlotte Street. Constructed in 1855, this is the oldest of these bunch of pubs still surviving in the CBD, so I might just make these the old factory condos. Now let's just ignore our power problems for a moment. One of the biggest impacts was losing my beautiful skyline. I think this was previously pretty bang on with Brisbane, but let us take a quick refresh on what we're going for here. And I'll be using a whole lot of high density office and commercial mixed with some signature buildings to get a similar vibe going on. Yes, getting there. Not quite complete, but I'm glad I got the basis for our new and improved CBD. And we got some of these much loved buildings from my younger days scattered around. I did skip over a bit of the city here along the Eagle Street Pier and moving into the valley, and the north around Turbot Street, moving up into Roma Street and Spring Hill. But I think we've done a lot of reconstruction here today, so I'll save that for a part 2. And if you made it this far in the video, you might want to consider chucking me a like or a subscribe. We're a new and growing channel over here, so consider it your good deed for the day. But for now, I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, thanks, bye.